Assalamu alaikum. This is the course of Macroeconomics Theory Advanced Approach directed to fourth year economics section that solves some applications relating to the equilibrium in the classical goods market. First, what is the impact of increasing capital stock on the real variables in the classical model? First of all, we have to remember that real variables means output, employment, real wage rate, according to the classical system. The questions asked about the impact or the effect of increasing capital stock, which means that new capital is purchased. It could be adopting new technology, and we have to get its impact on the level of employment, the potential level of output, and real wages. First of all, increasing capital stock is considered one factor which caused labor demand curve to shift upward or to the right. So the answer is when capital stock increased inside the economy, it would increase the real variables, which are the potential level of output, level of employment, and real wage rate. How to explain this? In order to show the impact of increasing capital stock graphically, or the effect of increasing capital stock on real variables according to the classical thought graphically, our starting point is a point of equilibrium in labor market, point A, where the demand curve for labor intersects the supply curve for labor. First of all, the first determined variable is the real wage rate. According to this rate, the optimal size of labor, which maximizes the profit of all the firms inside the economy, would be determined, which is L star 1. And according to this optimal size of labor, the potential level of output inside the economy would be determined, which is Y star 1. Now suppose that new capital stock is purchased and that has a higher level of technology, which imply that the marginal productivity of labor would increase. This means that output of each worker would be higher. This is shown graphically. First, increasing capital stock would shift the production function from Y0 to upward to Y1, which is now function of labor and new size of capital K2. And this new size of capital would have a positive impact on the marginal productivity of labor. And we know that according to the classical thought, demand curve for labor reflects the marginal productivity of labor. So increasing capital stock would shift the demand curve for labor rightward from DL1 to DL2, holding the price constant, and the new equilibrium now in the labor market would be at point B. Okay, which means that real wages would increase and the optimal size of labor, which maximizes profits, would increase. What does it mean? Increased from L star 1 to L star 2. This means that more workers are willing to work more hours, and then the potential level of output would increase from Y star 1 to Y star 2. Finally, the graphical effect of increasing capital stock on the level of output or the potential level of output in the goods market is the rightward shift in aggregate supply curve from AS1 to AS2. Second, state whether the following statements are true or false. First, the equilibrium interest rate according to the classical theory is the rate that equates the supply of money with the demand for money. This statement is false. Why it is false? Because according to the classical thoughts, interest rate is real variable, not monetary variable. We call it real variable if it is determined in real markets, while when the interest rate is determined in money market, we call it monetary variable. According to the classical theory, equilibrium interest rate is the rate that equates the supply of loanable fund, which reflects the savings, with the demand for loanable funds, which reflects the investment or private investment, plus bond finance budget deficit. So, the equilibrium interest rate according to the classical theory is real variable, determined in capital market, determined in real market. It's not monetary variable. Second, according to the classical theory, there is no need rule for the government in achieving the equilibrium in the market. Definitely this sentence is true. According to the classical thoughts, there is perfect flexibility of wages, prices in the same direction by the same percentage. Markets always in equilibrium. They stressed on self-correcting mechanism inside the economy, which is a concept of invisible hand. For example, when there is an excess supply in the goods market, producer would reduce the price level in order to restore equilibrium, and the market is always clear because wages and the prices are flexible in both direction, upward direction and downward direction. This is because there is no labor union. Thereby, any market disturbance would be adjusted by price adjustment mechanism, and there is no idle resources. At any time, economy is producing at the full employment level of output, so the actual output equals potential output. So there is no need for the government in order to intervene inside the economy in order to restore equilibrium. Owing to the invisible hand concepts, owing to their beliefs in Say's law, every supply creates its own demand. The market is always clear according to the flexibility of wages and prices. Thereby, there is no need for government intervention inside the economic activity. Number 3, there is no difference between the individual supply curve for labor and the classical macro labor supply curve. This sentence is false. Actually, there is a difference between labor supply curve according to the classical thought and the individual supply curve for labor that is studied in the microeconomics. Starting by the classical labor supply curve, we have to remember that in the classical thought, workers attempt to maximize his utility depending positively on real income, which is a real wages, and leisure time. The classical labor supply curve is upward sloping. What does it mean? It means that it is positively sloped. It means that more working hours is assumed to be supplied at a higher real wage rate. This is due to two effects: substitution effect and income effect. Substitution effect means that when real wages, which is his real income, increased, the time devoted to leisure time would be decreased, and workers choose to work more hours. According to the income effect, increasing the real wage rate mean that the consumer, which is a worker, is able to achieve a higher level of income, and the demand for goods would increase, so the demand for labor would increase by the firm, and hence the real wage rate would increase, and the quantity supplied of labor or the number of working hours would increase. So the time that is devoted to ledger would decrease by default. This is not the case for individual supply curve or the micro labor supply curve. It is backward bending, which means that at a very high income, the number of working hours would decrease, and the workers prefer to get a higher leisure time and less work. He substitutes leisure for work. He prefers to work less and to get more leisure. So the classical labor supply curve is upward sloping, while the individual labor supply curve is backward bending. Number 4, the classical labor demand curve can be expressed in terms of money wages or real wages. This sentence is true. We know that the perfect competitive firm, according to the classical thought, would maximize its own profits when the marginal productivity of labor equal real wage rates, or the value of marginal product of labor equal the money wages. What does the value of marginal product means? It means the revenue obtained from additional output produced by one more worker. It is the value of marginal productivity of labor. And we know that the demand curve for labor reflects the size of labor that is demanded by the firm in order to maximize the profits of the firm. So it could be reflect the value of marginal productivity of labor when the variable on vertical axis represents the money wages, and the demand curve for labor would represent the marginal productivity of labor when the variable on vertical axis represents the real or reflect the real wage rates.